as we let in a few more stragglers, let's roll into introductions and sort of talk about and get this sort of webinar going. And so if you've joined these webinars, you probably recognize my face. My name's Noah Warder. I'm the head of people over here over at Gusto, and I sort of run and host these webinars, and I get to talk to great individuals like Kwesi and Shelley. And so we'll kind of pass things over. And Shelley, why don't you start us off with your introduction, kind of what your background is and where you're coming from?
Sure. Background always human resources, particularly in the total reward space. Bit of a rewards nerd, whether I was in manufacturing, high-tech BlackBerry, retail with IKEA, insurance and financial services with Royal Sun Alliance, or even healthcare with Hamilton Health Sciences. Been a really interesting career, always in rewards, and very passionate about how rewards can change behavior and support and bring appreciation to the workplace for employees, whether it's comp and benefits or right through to support with mental health.
Awesome, thank you. And then Kwesi, why don't you give us your introduction as well?
Sure, Kwesi Thomas. Also probably more specialized in rewards than other areas, but self-proclaimed builder. I like building new programs and fixing programs primarily. A lot of times, and that's in the reward space, but also dabbled in other areas like HRS, et cetera, with some systems, et cetera, and have spent a good bit of my career with the recognition under my belt as a topic that I'm leading at various companies. Spent a lot of time in high tech, from Nortel to BlackBerry to Shopify. So I'm definitely a tech person by slant. A small stint in Manulife. And then realized I love tech more, so went back, and then been and then since been sort of doing a lot of helping small businesses, a lot of them tech again, but small businesses that are growing. So I'm enjoying that.
Cool, awesome. Well, let's kind of jump into the meat of things and chat. And like, there's no presentation here. We're kind of taking things a little bit informal, and the main reason we've got Shelley and Kwesi here is because of the breadth of their experience and what they've been doing and the consulting they're doing with other companies. And I think they've got like a good handle on what's happened over the past couple of years. I mean, we've all kind of seen it, and then, but also what's going to be happening next year. That's what we're here. What do we think is going to happen next year? And so I'd love to just kind of pass things off to you two, and let's dive into it. Like, what do you think is going to happen next year? I know we chatted a little bit earlier this week and kind of like picked out a few themes. And so I would love to like, let's kind of talk about those themes that you're seeing that are going to be really important coming in 2022.
Sure. I'll probably jump in. I think we'll start with the word that Shelley and I actually talked yesterday. I was getting ready for this, and we couldn't find a better word for it because this word is used in so many different ways. So we're gonna use the word flexibility, but we're gonna try to stay away from the flexibility that's defined as sort of workplace flexibility, et cetera, and really talk more about over the coming year, being flexible in how we approach the work we do as HR leaders. So we're going to see and continue to see that we've seen the past couple of years, where our processes, our tools, our systems, our cycles that we like to run, especially in HR, we love to run our cycles that happen quarterly or annually, et cetera, where how we do those things are going to get challenged, and we're going to have to be a bit flexible in how we execute those things, how we support our leaders, how we support the businesses that we support, in not just kind of going, hey, this is how we've always run our annual cycle this way, you're just going to do it on Zoom now instead. That may not work. And so at least with me, I'm seeing a lot of people asking me, hey, how do we adapt to the business changes that they've gone through, or just the environment changes with their people, and how do we adapt their processes or their teams to do so? So I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, but I know that's what I'm seeing a lot of these days.
Oh, for sure. I mean, for years we've been saying the only constant in the workplace is change. Yeah. And I think the last 2 years has really indicated that and pushed us more than ever to realize that's the way of the future, is going to be this constant change. And, a lot of people, we talked about returning to normal or back to the new normal or whatever. And I think you and I talked about the fact that we almost don't want to use that word, because there won't be normal per se anymore. And that's probably a good thing for us to kind of get rid of that, because it's all going to be about pivoting, adapting, flexibility. For the last year, HR has been challenged probably more than a long time to be at the senior table with the executives and help them figure out what to do. Like, it was like, we've got a pandemic. HR, help us. Do we let people work from home? Do we not let them work from home? Do we bring them back into the office? Do we not bring them back into the office? What about this whole, do we need a policy? Do we need guidance? Do we let them have their furniture? What do we do about chairs and equipment? And wow, we have all these Zoom meetings, and you can't have a background screen unless you update to 6th generation. Didn't I find that out? So it's a constant change for everybody. And I think HR has got to be ahead of that curve in terms of helping their executive, helping their organizations understand that there's going to be more pivoting, more flex. We're going to say, wow, it's going to be great. We're going to really try to bring people back into the office in February. Oh no, suddenly there's Omicron, there's something else happening. I don't think we're going to have to pivot again, and maybe we'll aim for April. It's constant.
Yeah, I think that rush for normal is actually, is a bit dangerous, because I'll just pick, like, let's just pick annual merit and progression or annual bonus cycles. It's like, let's go back to how we always done that. Like we go back to our norms. We get everyone back in the office. We go back to normal. And it's like, hey, number one, I relish this opportunity that we're in right now, because that means we can challenge some of the norms that we couldn't challenge before, right? You couldn't go and say, hey, I'm picking something, and I'm not saying this is right for any company out there, but our annual bonus cycle is too slow. Maybe our business doesn't move annually anymore. It moves semi-annually. Could never challenge that. But right now we've got a world where we've got some ability to challenge it. So the rush back to normal is, for me, dangerous, because you may have to pivot again, and B, you may lose the opportunity to actually challenge and grow where we couldn't have done that before. So I think, like I said, we've struggled with the word flexible when I opened it, because it doesn't do it justice. It gets, you hear flexible, you immediately think flexible workforce. We're actually saying, how we work needs to be flexible. How we provide the HR services and the HR skills that we provide to the company, that needs to be flexible. It's not just the, where you work, right?
Pretty much everything had to be flexible, right? How many of us last year this time were struggling with, well, we can't have parties and we can't have luncheons and we can't have dinners. So how are we going to do that? We need virtual programs. We need to skill people up with that. We need to, like everything that we had to do, which led us into kind of our second piece is how did we have to pivot in the future? Employees are going to gravitate to where they feel appreciated. I mean, we've got this thing, Noah, you threw it out there, and we talked earlier this week. Is it really clickbait? The whole Great Resignation, you know what I mean? It's like, oh no, this is just to drive human resources people a little bit stir crazy. But the reality is, employees are leaving, and they're picking and choosing where they were going to go to, and they're going to gravitate to organizations where they feel appreciated. So along with adapt, which was the word Kwesi and I came up with for that pivot flexibility that we see in the future, we actually started to talk about how important it is for employees to feel appreciated in the workplace for 2022.
Yeah, and there's so much of this that you see now of like the compensation that people are talking about, and like Kwesi, you brought it up, like most companies have had annual compensation adjustments, and everyone started doing out of sync compensation adjustments because they saw that they needed to do it just to make sure that people were feeling that appreciation. Yeah,
my 2 cents, business is not that's not that slow anymore. And for me, this a bit of a kick in the pants for us to move at a faster speed and keep up with the business, right? There are some good practices and some disciplines that come with some of the cycles we've always had. It's the question is, do they still match the business environment that we're working in, right? And so as we talk about appreciation, Shelley, I think you hit a nail on the head. For me, some of the things that you come to expect, like, salary and bonuses and those, benefits, they're almost table stakes. And, if you're leaving somewhere to go somewhere else for a higher salary, then that's probably not a salary issue. There probably was a job match issue or a leveling issue or something else that was holding you back. but you are still leaving because of appreciation, about feeling connected to, and feeling that connection to what you do. You no longer have that ability to just walk by, go downstairs to Tim Hortons if you're in Canada, or, so coffee time if you're somewhere else that's still open. But you get where I'm going. You don't have Dunkin' Donuts or something else, but you no longer have that ability for people to feel appreciated without actually consciously or subconsciously doing those things that you would have done in person. And so finding ways to do that in a remote way and doing it constantly enough for people to actually feel appreciated, it's a tough thing, right? It's how do you communicate, how do you continuously give the employees that feedback on how their work is doing. I know some people don't need that feedback, they're driven internally, but a lot of them people do. They need to know that they're doing a good job. They need to know that they are, that their supervisors are happy with the work they're doing. And so a lot of what we're seeing, at least what I'm seeing, is people looking for ways to make sure that they are connecting and that they are giving people that feedback or that appreciation as well. Before I jump, the other part there is that there's this redefinition of what is above and beyond. Shelley and I talked about this, like appreciation. Everywhere I've gone, I've kind of taken the approach that, your job is what you're expected to do. All of the recognition programs and tools we do are always for going above and beyond. But what's above and beyond now that you're not in that same environment working the same way? And I think it's easy to not have that conversation of defining, what am I expecting you to do? How am I expecting you to do it? So that people can go above and beyond, and you can also respond to recognizing and appreciating it. I just went through a couple of different thoughts there, but this is one of those areas where I'm passionate about. So recognition has been with me for a while. So for me, this is getting people to really understand above and beyond, and having those conversations in this new world is key to doing any recognition or any sort of appreciation.
So two pieces jumped out at me from some of the stuff you were just saying there, Kwesi. One is, and yeah, I'm so passionate about appreciation, but the aspect too, as just like any other rewards, there's an individuality to it, right? Like, what is the language in which an employee wants to be appreciated, right? So it's what they're really missing is that, oh, let's walk to Starbucks with me. We're going to go grab a cup of coffee. And by the way, how you did on that project was great. I'm buying today, da 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 da, with your leader. And that meant the world to me. And now I can't do that. And leaders need to understand how they're going to do that. Whereas, like you said, that may not mean anything to you. You want to be appreciated in your pocket. You want to hear about your bonus or something else. And then leaders themselves, like you said, the whole measurement tool around how can I tell how productive somebody is because the workplace has changed, all of that brings a whole new dimension to it as well. And then the other piece with that measurement is I'm going to challenge that a little bit about above and beyond when we talk about stress in the workplace, right? Because I really great quote I read the other day was about, we need to stop working really hard to make our employees resilient and start looking at the stress that's on them, right? Like in terms of the workplace and what's going on there. And so all of that goes back to, again, adapt and back to appreciate. So are we appreciating the circumstances employees are working under for the past year and what they'll continue to probably be working under into the next year? Whether they have a house full of children that they're also trying to deal with Zoom calls, or aging parents, or mental health issues, or family mental health issues. It's that whole body, whole person thing. And even the straight talk from their leader to say, hey, I appreciate that this isn't the normal anymore. I appreciate that this is harder than it used to be, or appreciate that you wish you could get back into the office and we can't get back into the office, or that you don't feel safe coming back in. All of that is appreciation, again, depending on the language in which someone wants to be appreciated.
Yeah, I think you're in it, and like you said about that adaptability of being able to adapt our programs that are individualized, so that people feel that we're also taking care of their specific needs, not just the needs of the overarching group that is their team and their workplace. And so that there is that adaptability to make sure that your benefits and your mental health providers and all that stuff are not just a one size fits all, but are adaptable and provide resources that are important to individuals and their needs and not necessarily the needs of everyone else on their team. And making sure that like you're creating not necessarily custom programs for every single person, but you're providing enough flexibility and adaptability in those programs that people feel that like their needs are also being met, and as well as the team member who sits virtually beside them, who has a whole suite of other different issues that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
For sure, for sure. And up until now, like we've been talking about what HR needs to do for 2022 in terms of to focus on with the great, resignation and inclusive workplaces, et cetera, and these issues of adapt and issues of appreciate. But the key underpinning to all of that in the past, in the present, and in the future is the leaders in the workplace. And so, Kwesi, I know you're pretty passionate about that one as well, too, and what we're going to do to equip.
Kwesi, you're muted. You're muted.
Sorry, you're right, Shelley, in the sense that it's one of those things I've always had a sort of pet peeve as a HR person growing up in the programs is, you start off your career as an individual contributor, you're doing your own work. And then one day you've done such a good job as an IC that you're now a team leader or a manager. And we tend to send you off to some 1 day, 2 day, maybe 3 days over the course of 3 months management training. All of a sudden you're supposed to be a leader that knows how to lead people. That has always bugged me as a person becoming a leader myself, as well as the person sometimes overseeing those programs. And more than ever, I think the most impact we can have with all of our HR programs is really equipping our leaders to be good leaders. They are we as HR professionals aren't seeing people in the hallways. We aren't popping into teams. We aren't doing all those things we can do. We're still trying to connect as much as we can, but people are working with their leaders more than ever, one-on-one or in groups on Zoom, et cetera. And the most, for me, the most multiple is not the right word. The most we can do to multiply our impact is to really spend time teaching our leaders how to lead and teach them how to deal with these situations that they're going through now, right? People are more comfortable and willing to talk about their problems than they did before. And sometimes, I said this earlier to Shelley yesterday that, you don't get to leave your problems at home and go to work and then come back home anymore. You just get to close the door for a couple hours. And for me, I get to close my door for a couple hours until my kids come home at 3 and then they're back in my house. And they're not gone until 5 or 6 when I got back in the car, got on the train, right? So it's a very different world. And so teaching our leaders how to manage through the issues their employees are going through, how to lead, how to adapt to one employee that's different than another employee. These are things that I think will have a multiplier effect if we can really help our leaders be better leaders right now, as opposed to another, X program, right? Shelley, I'm not sure if you feel the same way, but this was one for me. If I would ask people to take away one thing is, how do we equip our leaders to do their job in this current world? And more than anything else.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And in fact, it underpins the other two things we were talking about, right? We have to teach our leaders to be able to adapt and have them work in a different way with employees. And we have to teach our leaders to appreciate and in different ways and different means. I mean, it's pretty funny. You were on mute. I don't know if you caught while you were talking, I had to go on mute because I glanced out of the window and I could see a delivery truck coming in, which means my doorbell might go and the dog's going to bark and I'm on a call at home. So it's just that whole adapt again, like it's just constant what our employees are up against, and they are looking for that appreciation. They are looking for that training, all of that. They want leaders that are equipped to help them through it, leaders that are equipped to work in those new ways of adapting, leaders that know, okay, you know what, the cycle's too long. We have to do performance reviews twice a year, or I have to be able to provide that feedback much more often. I have to be able to talk with employees about mental health. I don't have to be a psychologist or a psychotherapist, et cetera, but I have to be able to ask the right questions. I have to show that I care and that I appreciate what they're going through, the stress, the working from home, the unsafe workplace, the elderly parent, the kids that are coming home from school early, and the fact that we can't get away anymore. Kwesi, I think you were talking before, an hour commute on a GO train. A lot of people go, "Oh my God, how did you do it?" And yet when suddenly that was gone, part of me missed that. You've got an example about that as well. That was my time.
Yeah, no, a good example. A good example of that. I use my dad as an example. He was working downtown Toronto at a bank for 40 years or so, 30, 40 years. And so he gets on the train every morning, packs a lunch, gets dressed, gets on the train, goes downtown, does the same thing every day. All of a sudden he's working from home, and they decided to downsize during COVID, so they have a smaller place. And I could visibly see him, like, something definitely put like a weight on him for a while. And so I'm not his boss, but because he's working for somebody else. But I reached out and said, "Hey, what do you need to how do we help you?" Right. And what we did was, I have an office in Mississauga. It's not a big office. I said, "Hey, cool. You take my office 2 days a week, pack your lunch, drive to the office, and work from here." That 2 days of relief is all he needed for him to re-engage and have that energy to go again. Right. And so I think the challenge we have, again, back to teaching our leaders, is we've always been taught, like, there's certain things we don't want to talk about because it's a slippery slope, and we don't trust our leaders won't go too far down the slippery slope and be in people's, where they shouldn't be mental, like, too far, as a psychologist has just said, right, Shelley? Yeah. We've got to teach them to recognize the weight that somebody might be on and how to get them help. We can no longer just go, "Hey, don't worry about it," right? And so I think for me, it comes back to equipping the leaders with the tools they need to work with today. And that is going probably a little bit into the uncomfortable, but making sure that we've got enough into it that allows us to support our employees, support the business, but without, but giving them the tools to do it right, right? The opposite is we don't teach them how to do that, and somebody starts, going down, "Well, tell me about your wife's problems. Why is your wife nagging you?" My wife does this. You don't want to go down in those. You don't want to go down in those trenches, right?
For sure. Yeah. I've been around long enough. Those days back, from a health and safety and wellness perspective, is don't ask, don't tell, don't want to know. And that's so wrong today, where we're expecting our employees to bring their whole selves to work. We want all of that. And the employee wants all of that back. The employee wants that understanding and appreciation and fairness and health and safety and all of those kinds of things. And so it's going to come from the leader. So again, it's equipping the leaders to open up the conversation, to feel safe about it, to get them the support that they need to carry it on, and to show compassion. That's a big one these days, is because compassion is a little bit different from empathy and sympathy. It's actually taking some action with it. So I understand that you're having some problems. I understand that you're going through a grief process or something along those lines, but okay, so what can we do? Can I alter your shifts for this afternoon or for tomorrow? Would it help if somebody else took those parts of your job while you're not feeling yourself? What can we do? How do we adapt? Again, that can't be HR doing all of that. That has to be the leaders doing that.
Yeah.
Right? There's an old comp saying way back when that employees trust comp information from their leaders more than they trust it from comp specialists. That was always a little tough for me to take. What do you mean you don't trust me? But it's true. And so we would try to equip leaders with the comp information to relay to their employees. Well, now we need to equip leaders with so much more than just salary ranges, right?
Yeah. And so I would just to point out, I think there's the positive. I don't want to call it positive or negative. There's also the other, like, there's the flip side. There's also the negative conversations that we have to equip them to have. Like, more than ever, like, you're going to have employees whose performance need coaching or who are having challenges. So now I'm just talking about supporting people through, through whatever they're going through. Sometimes there's also that conversation of, "Hey, you need to log on XYZ, or I need you to do XYZ on a more timely basis," because we are seeing that as well, where some people's performances are slipping because they're in that environment. So you've got to equip them to really manage their employees wholly, not just, support mental health, etc. We also give them the tools to have,
hard conversations,
right? More than ever. So for me, this is that season where on the other end of it, I hope we have stronger leaders. And we've also have, HR programs that are a bit more tied to the business and the current state of the business, because we've rethought them and being adaptable. And then we also come out with, a greater sense of doing better on appreciation. For me, it's the the cheapest part of what we can do in HR with the biggest return, right?
Great.
Yeah.
For sure.
And we're like with the huge talent shortages and the talent crunch and the great resignation or migration or whatever you're calling it, more and more leaders are being promoted into those roles, and you're finding younger leaders and new managers and new leaders who have no idea what they're doing. And like you said, Kwesi, and they probably have even less direction than we probably all got when we were promoted into those roles, because things are moving even faster. So it's like, I don't have time to give you 4 days off to, do manager training or leadership training. I just need you to do it and come to me when you have issues. But that doesn't work anymore. It doesn't, like, it's almost this oxymoron that we're seeing, is where we're moving so fast, we're not giving leaders the skills that they need to be effective, and we're asking them to do more in this virtual environment. And so I was actually talking to a candidate who was like, you need to brake before you can go faster. Brakes aren't to stop your car, they're to slow you down so you can go faster later on. And so I really like that analogy when I was chatting with them, and I was like, oh, that's a really good analogy for like any business part of the business. Is often you have to brake before you can go faster.
Right. And this is a great time for leaders to stop, or for employers to stop and think about that, and think about what do we need to do to train up, to break, and take that opportunity of the break to train people to go faster, to move it all up. Because how many times have we been said, employees don't leave organizations, they leave leaders, right? And I think more than ever before, you're going to see some of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and there are lots of ways to do that, right? We no longer have this sort of learning leadership by osmosis because you're around other good leaders all the time. I think we just have to be more conscious of how we ensure we equip our leaders, right? And that might be those training courses. That might just be coaching sessions. That could be a whole lot, or partnering a newer leader with a more seasoned leader, right? So there are lots of ways to do that, but I think we have to be conscious about making sure our leaders are strong.
Mentoring programs, buddy programs, situations where you're pairing up every leader in your organization with somebody else. So, hey, Kwesi, can you talk to me for a little bit? Because I've got an employee and I'm having a really tough time with how to have this conversation, but this is what I need to do. Have you ever had this scenario? Can you walk me through? Let's role play. Let's figure out how I need to have that conversation. That doesn't take a lot to set up those kinds of connections and relationships in your organization. And that may be what people are actually coming into the office for. I mean, Towers Watson is saying that the office now in the future will be where we do convene, collaborate, train, orient, etc. Working from home will be more where we're doing our individual work. So again, adapt, equipped, and make sure that you were appreciated.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how the evolution of teams is going to continue to grow, and see where this is happening. And like you said, and I think there was another survey, in Microsoft or another company, where it's like 86 of employees expect to be remote or partially remote from now on. Like 86% of employees say that they expect to be remote or partially, not even expect, they want to be, like, they don't want to go back in the office full time. So that's
expect to be in the office way less than 5 days per week. Absolutely.
Yeah, no one wants to go in more than 2 to 3 days. And there is a small, segment of the population who misses that and wants to be in there 5 days a week. But that's no longer the norm. And like you said, we need to learn how to adapt to make sure that our leaders are effective and all those kind of good things. And I know I've been seeing a lot in my feeds and a lot of articles coming my way of like upskilling. Like we were talking about how we need to focus on the leaders, but a lot of these articles are talking about upskilling the general team. And I think what you two are trying to get at is the best way to do that is to actually upskill your leaders, because then they will be able to upskill your team. And so I think a lot of these articles and sort of people are saying is missing the mark a little bit of, like, they keep talking about how important it is to upskill your team and upskill your people, because that will keep them in their roles and show that you appreciate them and that you're adapting to their needs. But if you're not upskilling your leaders in a more meaningful way, then the programs you set in place are just going to fall short, because there's that bottleneck that you've created in your organization of your leaders, your managers aren't able to contribute and help your teams as much as they could be if you were helping them as much as you could be.
Exactly, because then they can model all the behavior you're looking for.
Yeah. And I think, Kwesi, when we've talked earlier this week, you brought up a really good point that I want to bring up here, which is like making sure things are culturally aligned to your organization, because every organization is so different. We all have different values. We all have different missions. Some have to be hybrid because they might have frontline workers who are in manufacturing facilities or in labs or what have you. And I think that's such an important piece, is there is no one size fits all here. And we can't even give you like we can't say this is how you should go train your managers, because every organization needs such a different and an adaptable approach to this.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing that with a few clients or potential clients who have come to me with this preconceived notion of something they've read that somebody else is doing, or they've heard about X company doing Y, or Google's doing this, or Apple's doing that, and they said, well, why? And it's okay, pause. Like, what is your company? What are your values? What is the culture you're building? And then does that make sense for what you're trying to do? And I think you have to, I almost want to say, why bother having the values and the cultures, the culture definitions that we do, if we don't hold them up in a time like now and say, okay, where are we going, right? And maybe they need adjusting, but I think this is the time to actually go, we have a culture or a value system we're trying to build toward, and on the other end of whatever this is, or an X amount of time, are we building towards that, or are we tearing away from that with some of these programs, policies, changes that we're doing? And so for me, it's a bit of a break or a pause or a caveat. Like when we're looking at these things, it's kind of go, hey, okay, got it. So-and-so down the street is doing that with their employees, but they have a different culture, than we do. Especially, I think for us, a lot of what we read in the articles, et cetera, sometimes they're enterprise, or they're enterprise level type policies or things that are making the news, not what company X who has 100 employees is doing, right? And so what's good for enterprise level company with 50,000 employees may not be right for your 100 person or 200 person company. I think so right now, holding those values up and really making sure that your values and your culture make sense, like they're aligned to what you're doing in your programs, or what you're changing your programs, makes sense.
Yeah. And I think like it's if you're not really focusing on those values, that culture, that whatnot, you'll start seeing these micro cultures starting to pop up in your organization, where your different teams are doing different things, and then you create this different tiers in your organization, which can just tear a company apart and destroy it faster than any competitor ever could.
Yep. And now's the time, with those pulse surveys, all of those kinds of things. Do people understand what your principles were, your guiding principles, your culture? Are they, those behaviors? Are they exhibiting those behaviors? Can you reward them to start to exhibit those behaviors and encourage it and those kinds of things? Because why did we set those guiding principles for our organization if in times like these, like Kwesi said, we're not pulling them out and going, we set these so that when we had a question, it made it really easy to answer the question. Right. Because they guide us, right? So that if, wait a minute, obviously the answer is this, because we said we are this kind of organization. So why would we head down that path? We already decided we're not that. Yeah. This is who we are. And I'm not saying that those things can't change over time or all of that, but it is still who you are, your culture, your strategy, and on your path. And yeah, things are going to wobble a little bit, particularly where we are now, but they are your compass. And now's a great time to bring that back out to people.
Yeah, especially if you're having challenges defending some of the things that your senior leaders are asking you to do or are trying to do. But also a great point, because a lot of times you're like, sure, you get an email saying, hey, we should be doing X, Y, Z, bam. And you're kind of like, okay, but how do I push back, or how do I alter, or how do I, gently nudge this a little, a couple degrees to the left? And a lot of times, or sometimes you find that you should just align because it did make sense with your principles that you had already. But these things were there for a reason, right? So dusting them off and making sure we're using them now is the time to use them.
Cool, awesome. And so we've got a few questions from people who registered, and I want to open up the floor to people in the audience. Start throwing your questions in the QA, start throwing them in the chat, and we can start answering them. But before we do that, I wanted to reiterate these three themes for 2022 that we think are really important, that we talked about, which is being adaptable, being flexible with your programs, how you're approaching things, knowing when to say, I don't know, we'll figure it out, or knowing when to say, we're going to try this for 3 or 6 months and it might not work. And that's okay. We'll try something different when that happens. I mean, that's like the first one. The second one was like that appreciation, and just be so appreciative of your teams that you have now, because there's a good chance that recruiters are spamming their inbox with so many different offers, and there's so many other organizations that are trying to hire those people as well, and just showing them that like they're the lifeblood of your organization and making sure that they know that. And then equipping your leaders, making sure that those leaders in your organization have the tools and the means to lead their teams and their departments, or even just their projects, because like your leaders don't always have to be team leads. They can also be those leaders that are individual contributors. And so also making sure that those people are also getting the resources they need to learn and grow. I think like adapt, appreciate, equip. These are the 3 things that you're really going to want to focus on in 2022 for your organizations. And Kwesi, Shelley, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah,
that was pretty good.
There,
awesome, great.
I wish I could say it that well.
Well, I got a few questions here from people who registered, and so I'm going to pose them to you. And then maybe we'll get a few more coming in from the audience. But first one here, and I think this one is just like, it's very specific. Just what are some of the more innovative perks and benefits you've seen lately? So end of 2021, or things that you think are going to be important in 2022. We talked about appreciation, so recognition programs, that kind of stuff. But anything else that you're seeing that you think is really important that some people should be at least looking at for their organizations?
Last year I saw a really interesting, I was working for an organization where we used to have holiday parties, big holiday parties, and had a massive budget for holiday parties. And suddenly, of course, we couldn't do that. And what surprised me was when we substituted it with gift boxes and virtual gift cards for many people, the huge, overwhelming appreciation we got back in human resources into the executive team, that now suddenly they felt that things were fair, because they knew that a lot of money had gone into the holiday party, but a ton of employees in their minds weren't going. That wasn't what they wanted to do or how to celebrate. And they always felt a little bit, quote unquote, ripped off, because they only got that perk if they went to the holiday party. Whereas suddenly now the gift card went out to everybody, or the gift box went out to everybody. And they felt a more equitable appreciation across the organization and more connected. So we actually got employees saying, I've been here for 23 years. This is the best I've felt over the holiday season. So I thought that was not so much that it was such a unique reward, but in place of another reward, right, that people didn't feel was equitable. In terms of sign of the times, I'm going to jump in with another one, Kwesi, while you're still thinking, and it's less about rewards and more about benefits, but it was adjusting benefit programs to align better with support for mental health. So where we may have programs that offered $250, $500, $800, $1,500 a year, I think was one, with one organization, $1,500 a year for health professional support. So that could be your naturopath, it could be a speech language pathologist, could be physiotherapist, but it would also include social workers, psychotherapists, et cetera. And splitting that out and saying no, and trying to find dollars by potentially reducing other areas of benefits, so that we weren't sacrificing someone's mental health for their physical health, or vice versa. So having a separate pot of money strictly for social work, psychotherapy, psychologist, that type of support around mental health, over and above our employee assistance programs. But really calling that out and changing the structure of the benefits program to say, this is how important we think it is. We think it's just as important for you to see a psychotherapist as you to see a physiotherapist. And we shouldn't have to cut one for the other. You should be able to have access to both. That and virtual health programs, obviously, that was a biggie for 2021 for sure, is where we were able to roll out programs where somebody could dial a number or face-to-face like this and get mental health and or physical health support.
Yeah, I mean, I want to make sure some time for this, so I won't answer this one long. Definitely seen some rejigging of benefits to kind of take physical and mental and separate them, because right now a lot of the times that paramedicals bucket is always the same for everybody, and so you got to go, am I getting my back adjusted, or am I getting my and so separating those a bit more is what I've seen. I've seen quite a bit of it in the second year. So in year one, there was a lot of money being spent on helping you equip your home office, like the basics, got a keyboard and a screen and a blah, blah, blah. In year two, seeing some more of like, okay, your office is functional. Now let's make your office like pleasant to be in. And so you're seeing, I've seen everything from blankets to sweaters to coffee mugs, other stuff being done to help your new office be a place you're enjoying to work in, right? I've seen a bit of that. And I've also seen some companies send employees dinner. Like send them something that is completely like, just like, this has nothing to do with helping you work. It's gonna, there's dinner today, you don't have to worry about it, right? Or dinner the next day, you don't have to worry about it. So I'm seeing a lot of that where it's just taking care of some of these side life perks. And I've only had one person to reach out to me on, which I thought was a great one to bring back. Previous life, one of the companies I worked for, they allowed me to put in a program that gave 2 hours of house cleaning to every employee every month. And so that was previous employer, which I still had that perk in my life, didn't, but I was one company who actually took that as a recommendation to do for employees, was for a period of time, they gave them a couple hours of home cleaning just to assist with them in their home environment, right? Very hard to administer. They were very centralized. And so they had, they were all, most of their employees were in 1 or 2 service providers area, so it's hard to execute, but I know that went a long way for the employees.
Noah, you've got a good example of one of these. I think you wrote about one recently on LinkedIn. Was it somebody that recently had a baby and how they were supporting their family?
Oh yeah. I mean, parental leave policies and like that kind of stuff. Like, I think that's table stakes now. If you don't have a parental leave policy, you need to put one in. And I think the biggest trend that we're seeing in that is not splitting it out into primary and secondary caregivers, is just having it as a parental leave policy, regardless of whether you're, adopting, or you're the partner of the birth parent, or you're having a surrogate, whatnot. Everyone gets the same benefit, and it's kind of equal and supportive of all parents. And the other thing that we added on to that, specifically at Gusto, which we like, was like giving parents the option to have a flexible return to work. So like, you don't have to come back full time when your leave is done. You can come back part time and slowly ramp yourself back up. And then also providing them with a little like bonus when they come back of like, we know how much more difficult it is to prepare meals and get groceries and do all the things that you need to do now that you're back at work. Here's a little bonus to make that transition easier. So you can order in a little bit more. You can get those diapers delivered to you. You can set up that auto renewal Amazon diaper order, which is awesome. And if you're a new parent, you should do that, because they'll just send diapers to your house every month, and it's amazing.
Well, there's appreciation and loyalty, because I think, out of that appreciation, we appreciate you as an employee. We appreciate what you're going through. We appreciate that you now have a new person in your life that is demanding all kinds of things, but right. And then from that employee's perspective, there's going to be a lot more loyalty to the organization, which is what we're all about.
Yeah. And I think, and we actually have a webinar on this coming up in January about how to like build out really flexible wellness benefit programs. So I'm excited to have that one in January, and it should be up on our webinars page pretty soon. But I think like that adaptability, what you're both talking about, of like, we need to relook at what our benefits are actually providing people, and is it what's needed, and not make that decision in isolation, but to ask your people, okay, what's important to you? What would you like to see in our health and benefits program? What is missing? What do you see that you're not getting? What support are you not getting right now through the organization? And we did that, and people were asking, like, being like, well, we didn't see any short-term or long-term disability in the last program. It's like, oh, all right, well, let's get that in there, because that's, it's, for a younger tech company, sometimes it's those things that you don't think about, because your workforce might be a little bit younger, but it's also a really important thing to have. Cool. This next question, similar to the other one, is like, Great Migration, what benefits do employers need to be offering to retain and attract employees? And Shelley, you and I had a conversation about this a little while ago of like actually classifying your rewards and your perks and your benefits as to like what is for retention purposes, what's for attraction purposes, and what's like kind of like table stakes. And so I'd love for you to, because that I had never thought of, you know, my benefits program and my total rewards program in that way before. And so I'd love to just have you chat about that for a minute.
Well, I think it's a really big thing to communicate. You can't communicate about your benefits and rewards programs enough to employees. I can't tell you how many times in my career we've gone out, we've done sessions with employees, and we do the big whiteboard and, you know, tell us what you think is a benefit here at this organization. What have you got? And, you know, people are missing key ones. I'm like, whoa, what about this? And what about that? And, you know, somebody goes, oh, ice cream Fridays. And, you know, you have 10 people in the room go, we have ice cream Fridays. I didn't know we had ice cream Fridays. Or we'd hear back on a survey, you know, it's really, really great that we have a pension plan. I just wish there was an opportunity for money to come off my pay and go into an RRSP or RSP matching. Well, we do have that. We've had it for 10 years. What is going on here with this disconnect? So obviously we can never communicate enough. And so that right away is the key piece, is communicating all that you have in good ways, but also finding out what is valuable to employees that way. So which are the things that help keep you stay, like keep you here, that tie you in? Is it, oh, you know, you happen to be an organization with a defined benefit pension plan, but you'd be surprised how many people that are saying that's not what keeps me here. I stay here because of my leader. I stay here because of my manager, whatever it is, but that helps you categorize, right? And then the attraction, what drew you in? So a lot of this is survey work, talking to your employees, finding these things out. But even you in human resources or those responsible for rewards, recognition, benefits, comp, et cetera, categorizing that. And it's even like, okay, here's my table stakes that employees, you know, obviously base pay, et cetera, et cetera. But then what are the other ones? And then that helps you categorize. And once you categorize, you can start to decide where you can play. Because if you're an organization going into the Great Resignation and you're worried all about retention right now, you're going to buckle down and communicate like hell about those programs that you think are retaining your employees and making sure people know that they're there, they're taking advantage of those benefits. How many people are not contributing to their RSP because they didn't realize that there's a match and they're missing out on 1%, 2%, something like that on the table, or their 401ks for those in the US. It's fascinating how the employees, when you get out and do focus groups, what you will find that they do or don't know, or what they do or don't appreciate, and what means the most to them may be something that you threw in or the benefits provider threw in and you think, oh my goodness, had no idea this was so important to people. So it's I'm passionate about benefits, but I don't think you can spend enough time just sorting through what you've got, what employees perceive as important, and then putting them in that hierarchy and categorizing. Grace, you want to jump in on that one? I can.
Oh, you see, I like the early phase of this. When it's established, it's hard to move things around. But you know, every once in a while I get the opportunity to, with someone who's, you know, got 50 or 100 employees and they're trying to figure this out, versus those who have 1,000 and they've got this already in place and you're trying to adjust, because you really get to take all those programs or those areas and figure out how are you constructing your people culture, and what are you dialing up? Like, and so when I say base pay, it's table stakes. But if you decided to pay at P80, P90 of the market, it's not table stakes anymore. It's actually an attraction. You turn that into a different factor. Similarly, you can decide, hey, I'm doing nothing on benefits. Very little on retirement. I'm just going to do a 2% match, right? And you've dialed that one down. Right. And so you start to dial your programs, but I'm just about to put a ton of money in recognition and dial that way up, right? So you start defining how, you know, how these programs are used. And I think for me, a lot of times you go in and these are already established. So you're saying, hey, let's go, you know, if I go to someone and say, hey, let's go from a P50 or, you know, a middle P50 pay in the market, let's take you up to P80, and I tell them the dollar amount that costs, no one says yes. No one says yes. But at the same time, if early on, you have that path to kind of change those things. But I think taking that time to assess what you have And sometimes it's as simple as putting like a 0 to 10 scale, 5 in the middle, and deciding which programs are dialed higher, which ones are dialed lower now. And then saying, hey, you know what? We thought we were going to attract people on pay. We're not playing in that space. We got to figure out how to either raise that up or find some other areas that may be more cost effective to do that. And so taking stock of those programs, for me, if you get an executive offsite every once in a while, this is like my dream as an HR leader, to get that 2 to 4 hours to just do that exercise so that we actually have a strategy for what we're doing with our programs in the future.
Yeah, we were both lucky enough to work for a place like BlackBerry, where it would be suddenly like, oh, well, now we have employees in Singapore. We got to create a new benefits program. We got to and adapt to the culture as well too. Whoa, base pay expectation is quite different than it is in Canada or it is in the US, et cetera, and adapt accordingly. And when I taught comp and ben, I'd always say to people, it's really cool if you get the opportunity ever to play or start these things from scratch. Otherwise, a lot of times people think you can only tweak these over the years. And I've, over my career, have really said, no, I think I changed my opinion on that today, because I think it's up to us to really push. My friends in the insurance space are going to hate me for this, but really push our providers on benefits, because some of those plans and designs were built back in the 70s and 80s and even 60s. My goodness. And they haven't changed the design. They have not changed how they, administer life insurance. They have not changed how they administer long-term disability, et cetera. And so I think it's up to us in HR to kind of really push the envelope there and say, hey, I want to do something different for my employees. How can I do this? How much money can I take out of these programs and put into a flex program so it can be more individualized for our employees? How many ways can I reduce this spend here so I have more opportunity to increase my spending for my employees over here? Or choice and control. So I give employees more choice and control because they love that. And that is where I'm really responding to change in the workplace, right? The demographic in the workplace today versus what it was 40 years ago when those plans were designed is like night and day. And we need to be the people that push that and find out what we can do, or move on to your next provider that's willing to work with you and do that.
That's what we did. We went through that process this year where we dropped one provider who was fairly inflexible and went with a new provider, and our broker hustled hard to make sure that we got exactly what we wanted, which was we wanted that sort of base package where you have all your paramedical and all those types of things, but then we were able to create that flexible portion that allowed that flexibility. So we kind of did the 50-50 approach of like, there are people with families, there are people who have conditions that they need some of that just stable coverage for like drug and dental and paramedical and all that stuff. And then there's younger people who don't really care about that stuff as much, and they want to have flexible benefits where they can funnel that money into their yoga membership or their Headspace app or whatever, buying athletic apparel. And so we were able to build that sort of balanced approach to things. And I think that's what people expect now. They don't expect just a base package. They expect to be able to, like you said, pull those levers a little bit, tweak the things a little bit.
Yeah, and that's not just comp and ben. That's learning and development. That's the whole nine. Like you can really dial up a whole bunch of areas. I mean, I tell people I was lucky enough at Nortel. They paid for, as long as I passed the university course, they paid for the course and the books. So I did my entire undergrad because they paid for it. So I was never leaving while I was in school, because where else am I going to go? Who's going to pay for, and so you really define the how you want your people to attract and retain by how those levers you pull in your programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we got one more question, and I think this one's a little bit more specific, but let's see if we can answer. But what benefits brokers do you have good experience with?
Wow.
All Shelley's answers.
Should I turn off the recording, Shelley, so you're not on record?
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
I hope you're on the call listening
to message me on LinkedIn, and we'll have a separate conversation before I kind of go out there and qualify. I just think one of the most interesting, I'll tell a bit of a story instead, is working for organizations and always coming in as comp and ben. And then I got into an organization where I found out after I started that the insurance broker was us. So even though I was working for a property and casual insurance program, company, it wasn't until I got on board that the CHRO said, oh, by the way, you should know, like I was like, you know, are we with Sun Life? Are we with this? Are we with that? Who's our broker and who's our this? Well, we're our own broker and we're our own insurance carrier. We do health and dental benefits. We do this. And I was like, nobody said that in the interview. I asked, like, that's an important piece, because now suddenly if you're your own broker, you're really challenged. And I think that's when I could really get a sense of what I can move and what I don't want to move, and how I can push those buttons and flex. But I thought back on people where I had brokers in the past that had helped us, and big name brokers, from people like Towers and Watson and Stevenson and Hunt, which doesn't exist anymore because a lot of people have bought people in the insurance industry, particularly in Canada. So I don't want to name any more names than that, but feel free, reach out to me on LinkedIn, Shelley DaCosta, and happy to have some conversations about some brokers and make some recommendations that way. But like I said, I think all of them have a lot of the capabilities. They are going to tell you it depends on the size of your organization, right, and how many lives are there. And so then, there's all kinds of opportunities. So, and what you're really looking for is somebody that wants to work with you and willing to be creative to keep your business, because they never know who you're going to be next. And that's the other piece. You can be working for a very small organization and they are not really paying a lot of attention to you. And then tomorrow you get bought out by a big organization and you now are the person responsible for benefits for 4,000 lives. And suddenly every broker is calling you going, can I help? Can I help? Can I help? So those ones that stuck with you when you were small and were flexible for you, hang on to those. Hope that helps.
Well, I think we got to kind of wrap things up there. I want to say thanks to Shelley and Kwesi. It was great having you two on the call. I appreciate you taking the time, kind of chat about this. I hope, everyone who was listening in and joining us today got some good value out of this. Again, just want to reiterate those three things of adapt, appreciate, equip. 3 themes for 2022. Make sure that your teams are getting the appreciation that they need, your leaders are being equipped with the tools that they need, and that you're adapting because things are going to change. We keep seeing this. I know everyone was really excited to have an in-person holiday party this year, and that didn't happen because Omicron is coming on our way and a lot of people are starting to cancel plans, but just got to be adaptable, make things happen. So thanks again, everybody. Feel free to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn. Happy to chat, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Noah. Thanks, Praise.
Thanks.